Hello, welcome everyone. We're very excited today. We have another book launch. Um, this one is You're Something New. That's this beautiful book here, and that is a canyon picture there. Isn't that cool? So today we have author Meg Seitz with us. I'm Cori Wamsley. I'm CEO of Auroracorialis Publishing, and I'm going to let Meg introduce herself. So welcome, Meg.
Thank you for having me, Corey. I'm excited about the launch today. I'm excited to be one of your authors. So I just want to, first of all, thank you for all the help getting the book over the finish line. My name is Meg Seitz, and I am the founder and CEO of a company called Toth Shop. And we are a communications agency that focuses a lot on content, marketing, and brand storytelling. And I'm here today because my first book, You Are Something New, launches today on Amazon. And I think one of the things that Corey and I have talked about over the last several months that we've been working on is, I work so much in content and so much in writing and storytelling for other people that this book was really the first time that I had, as a business owner, I have turned it back on myself and put myself through the writing process, which is something that we have been asking clients all over the world to be doing over the last 10 years that we've been in business. And so this has been a really interesting process, very insightful process, carving out my first book. And I think, so Corey showed it to you. You Were Something New. The subheadline is Life Lessons to Radically Change How You Think About Business. And that's really the big subject here, is how are the life lessons that happen so organically, how do they impact how you show up in business and how you do business?
Yeah, I love that. This is such a cool book. We've never done anything quite like this one. I did want to ask, since you talked a little bit about what you do in your day job,
Mhm.
how is the process different for you between the typical type of writing that you do and writing a book?
Yeah. So obviously with communications today, things move really quickly. So my brain and my pen have been conditioned to think and write pretty quickly when it comes to trending stories, topics, conversation points, even that client that's like, hey, we really need to get something out next week. What can we do? And so I have trained my brain, and I think that's fair to say for our team, every member of our team is we've been trained to work really quickly. And with this book process, I really had to slow it down. So I think anyone who's an athlete will appreciate that it's almost like switching your training from like a 5K where you're kind of going for speed to a marathon, which of course you're going for speed, but it's a longer distance. And so for me, I had to really had to retrain my brain to just slow it down a little bit, and be a little bit more mindful, and realize too that the first draft was probably going to be a very first draft. And with your help, Corey, really kind of helping to, we didn't elongate the process, but I feel like we gave each chapter the right time and energy versus rushing it. So I think that's one of the things that has been different for me. And then the other thing that's been really different is the fact that over the last 10 years, my team has, we've really encouraged people and challenged people to write their own stories. Mm-hmm. And I really was feeling this stirring in the gut to be like, well, if I'm asking clients to do this, mm-hmm. I feel like I need to do it as well, to plant a flag for the process, but then also plant the flag for sharing your story and the way you approach life or work or family or business. And so I feel like I had to turn the tables on me, and bring that writing process to myself, which that could probably be a whole other book, trying to figure that out. But I do feel like I learned a lot about myself as both human being and business owner and writer through the entire process, start to finish.
I love that. I love that when we work on something like this, it really opens us up to, seeing things for ourselves in a different perspective too. I really appreciate the analogy that you gave as far as looking at it versus a sprint versus a marathon.
Yes.
Because I think that a lot of times we think about book writing and we have this image in our heads of like, oh, people just sit down and they just write the whole book. But there are drafts, there are different versions, there's feedback, there's, a pause, like that intentional pause of, okay, I wrote this, now I need to let it marinate. Like, just like if we were cooking something on the stove, we sometimes have to let it simmer, we have to let it cook, to let the flavors go through, and then you go taste it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of the first questions that people have been asking me, because I've been floating it by a couple of people just casually, the very first question a lot of people ask is, how long did it take you? Like, they're curious. I think people are naturally curious about the process and the time, because I also think that there's this weird thing that happens on social media where there are these, I don't know if they're influencers or coaches or whatever, who are trying to tell you that you can write your book in a month, or you can write it in a weekend.
Yeah.
And anytime I see that, I'm like, I'm sure somebody somewhere could do that. But I actually think that that's a little bit dangerous, because how you have to train and prepare your brain and your heart and just your calendar for the process. Like, it's not something you can do in a weekend or in a month.
Yeah. I think the best I've did 2 different books that were in 6 weeks, but there was all this stuff up front where I was thinking about it and getting that outline and being very clear about what I wanted to talk about in each chapter. So I wasn't including that in the 6-week writing process. And I think that sometimes when people are trying to get others excited about, quickly getting through the book process, which I don't like, I wish everybody would enjoy the book process. I think that there's this appeal to getting through it quickly, because a lot of people don't know how to write a book. They don't know what to expect. And they think, oh, okay, this guru says that I can do it. Well, there's stuff up front, like the outlining, and then there's the book writing process. And then there's that part afterwards where you have a draft. Yeah, in 6 weeks or a month or whatever, you might have a draft, but there's all this stuff afterwards where you need to actually process what you've written and make sure that's what you want to be telling your audience. And I think that's something that's definitely missing when the gurus are putting out some of their marketing copy.
Yeah. And I really do compare it to training for a race, because, you've got your training plan, but then you've got to think about what you need to do to prepare for your training plan. So I feel like your training is the drafting, but what do you have to do on the forefront to prepare yourself or family or your work team for you to start this project? So I do think that that's probably my biggest thing in my brain that I'm thinking about, is just thinking about it more as a marathon.
Yeah, I love that. I did want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about the book itself. So this was written as, I think the way you put it was bite-sized. So they're like little nuggets throughout the book. So you could pick this book up and say, hey, I've got 10 minutes while I'm waiting for my kid to get out of school, I'm going to read 1 chapter. Or, as I think you mentioned before, you want people to be able to read this on a short flight. They could pick it up, read it on the flight, and be done by the time they land. What was the purpose behind making everything bite size?
Yes. So it's a personal and a professional thing. I, as a consumer of content, I love bite-sized content. I love to be able to read an article start to finish in a quick sitting. I love books that I can get through or listen to quickly. And I think it's part of where our attention span is right now as thinkers and readers, is that I like snackable content, because I'm always on the go too. So I like to be able to get the beginning of a story and the end in one fell swoop. A perfect example is I started a book during COVID. It was a thick book. And this is not a knock on thick books at all. It's just how I approach them. I started a book at the beginning of COVID, and I think it took me like a year and a half to get through it, because I'd look at how much Be like, not today, not
Yeah.
today. And it wasn't something that I could easily pick up and just like, snag a chapter or two somewhere in it. It did need to be read start to finish. So one of the things that we're always challenging clients to do too is, in the scheme of a website, a story, a blog, we've got that first draft, we've got the long copy. How do we condense it? Like, how do we take 50 words and make them 25 or 10 really powerful words? Because I think a lot of us are kind of err on the side of long form. Like, I'll just get it out there and I'll brain dump, and then we publish the brain dumps. When in reality, I think it's a trick to train your brain to think, okay, I've got 50 words, just as an example, I've got 50 words. How do I get this down to 25? What is really important about getting it to 25 or maybe getting it to 10? And the best example too that we do with clients is core values. We have some clients that come to us and they're like, here are our 20 core values. And it's like, this is great. But if you were to quiz somebody about that, it's really hard to remember 20, like maybe 10, maybe 5, maybe 3. Yeah. So I think it's just, it was an interesting challenge for me. Obviously, I could have written a lot more chapters, but it's come down to 10 stories that do not need to be read in any order, and you can digest them in just a couple of minutes. You get a story, you get a lesson, and then the other part of it too is at the end of every chapter, you get prompts or questions for radical change. So if you think you're off the hook and you're just responsible for reading this book, there are questions at the end to just think about some big questions, conversation starters for your own life or work or family life.
Yeah, I love books that make you think. And I wanted to show you guys the side view of this because we were talking about it. So you can see it's a fairly thin book, and I did thumb through real quick. Chapter 1 is 8 pages. So you can definitely read 8 pages. Everybody has time to read 8 pages.
Everyone has time to read 8 pages. That's like such a good, yes.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, this is something I could read to my kids because it is so snackable and there's so much story involved. I don't know if they'll be down with it, but it's something.
Maybe give it a shot. You never know. Actually, I bet some of the questions at some of the ends of the chapters, Corey, I bet they could answer some of them.
I bet they would have some unique perspectives. That might be an idea for us to do like a spoof sort of thing where we're like, this is what kids think.
A kid's version of this. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about trying to get something from here down to here. And I think that is a huge challenge for all writers. I think one of the most extreme examples that I've personally been through with that was when I worked for the Department of Energy, and we would have, this project that people have been working on years of their lives. We're involved in this project. We knew like what they had done, who was involved, what the outcomes were. These are the, 90% and 10%, like all the different things that we were supposed to include. And we'd be told like, can you get that down to like 200-300 words? So we'd be sitting there like, well, what is the most important thing? And I think that's a good question to be asking ourselves is when we're writing, like, yeah, we can have this great big story. We can have all these details, but what is it really that the reader needs? And it's really down here. And I think that this book really, thinking epitomizes, but it kind of epitomizes that idea is to be able to break things down into something that is smaller and that we can just grab and go.
Yeah. And that's the part that takes time. To our point earlier about, sitting with writing, it's nothing that you can do. You can't take 300 words down to 50 words in one sitting. It takes, curating it a little bit, and it takes a couple different sessions. So I think that's the other thing too, is people who are fast writers can probably write, those 50 words quickly. But if you're trying to break it down, like that takes a little bit more, because it is a question of what matters, who's the audience, what matters, and what do we want them to take away from this piece. And that's the challenge that takes some time.
Yeah, it almost ends up, I know I use a lot of art sort of analogies when I'm talking about writing, but if you've ever seen somebody carving, like doing ice carving or carving a piece of wood, it's like they have to narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down. And then eventually you see the faces and whatever the picture is coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes time like that. And that's, I think if that's the biggest lesson, it takes time and it takes energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to know, who specifically did you want to help with this book?
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this really early on, and I think I think it's shifted slightly. I do think it's for the business community.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's for, I was initially going for senior leaders, C-suite leaders who might need a little boost, they might be out of brilliant ideas or stalled. I think you used the word stalled. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. I stand by that. But what's interesting is I feel like there's also a place here for emerging leaders too. Mm-hmm. Young leaders who are in their 20s and their 30s and are trying to figure out, I'm going on these great trips and then I'm working, or I have these really fantastic family moments or family milestones or what have you, and I'm working. A great example, not to bring it up again, I feel like I'm on this marathon theme, but I talk about in the book how a friend of mine had run a marathon, and I was like, oh, what'd you learn from it? And like, what are you taking into work because of it? And she was like, I hadn't really thought about it like that. Yeah. So I think it's an opportunity for leaders in the business community, whether they're just starting out or they're very seasoned senior leaders. I think it's an opportunity to just pause and really evaluate how these things that are happening in your life, these places you're going, these experiences, like how they do impact how you show up in business and how you do business. Because my big thing and our big thing at Toth Shop is, how do we bring more humanity to our work? How do we bring more humanity to writing? How do we just bring the human factor back into the way we're working? And I feel like we got a glimpse of that during the pandemic. So obviously for a terrible reason, we rediscovered our humanity. And I feel like the farther we get from that, the farther we're getting away from, the humanity of life and work and impact. So I feel like if you're at a place where you're like, I just need some fresh ideas, or I need a different way to think about these things that are happening, I think I hope that I can show you how I processed a couple of the 10 lessons in my life and work, how I've processed them and how they've become a part of my working life.
Very cool. I love that that you are taking these ideas and, talking to your friends about them. I think that it's really interesting as adults, the things that we think about and the things that we talk about with our friends. We've moved from like, oh, what are you going to be doing tonight, to how does this impact you and other pieces of what you're doing? And I love that that's where we've gone with it.
Yeah, I think as you get older, I turned 40 this year. And I think as I've gotten older, the more I'm more interested in easy places to park. Yes. And deeper conversations with people. I feel like we kind of graduate from, the surface level conversations to more like, well, how did that make you feel? Or like, what are you going to do about that? And just deeper conversations. And those are the conversations I want to have, whether it's with our team or clients or family friends. And so I hope this might bring it back for some people.
Yeah. I'm also hoping that as people are reading books like this, that it's adjusting things down the line. So like, we're in our 40s, you just welcome. So, we're in our 40s and that's where we are right now. And I'm hoping that as people read books like this, people in their 30s are going, oh, you know what? That is refreshing. And that's what I want to be doing too. Mm-hmm. I want to be having these conversations and that they'll pick it up. I know I have those kind of conversations with my kids. Well, what did you think about that? How did that make you feel? Why do you think that they were doing that? Kind of understanding different perspectives. So I love all that.
Yeah. Yes, I think if we can raise the humanity factor at a younger age, I think that like there's nothing wrong.
I love that. We have a couple people watching. Just wanted to say hello. Kelly says, this is probably from earlier when we were talking about snackable content. She says, I love snackable content and snacks.
I mean, I'm never going to turn down either of those.
Exactly.
So, yes, I'm all for the snacks and the snackable content.
Yes. So with the book and all these things, you know, the conversations you've been able to have, and I know that as you were writing each chapter, you were reflecting. So I'm going to ask you, overarching, well, as you were working on the book, how did that change how you look at business overall?
Yes. Well, what's great is that some of these these stories are from a variety of my life stages. So some are from, 15 years ago, some are from last year. And so it's kind of fun to bring them all. It's almost like you're bringing them all to one dinner table. And you get to package them under one big umbrella. And I think one of the things that was really interesting to me is I've got these 10 stories. What's the general theme? What's the overarching theme? And I think that's one of the pieces when it comes to doing business that I'm aware of is when we're working with a client and they've got marketing and branding and sales and logos and all of these things, I think our bigger call to action is how do we join them in stepping back and looking for a general theme? Like, how do we look for the top of the umbrella, so to speak, so that they can start to see what their mission and vision are or what their values are? Like, how do we step back? Because I think from a branding perspective, that's what we're after, is we're after that consistent, cohesive look and feel and experience. And so for me, one of the things that I was challenged by, both you and Karen, the cover designer, was like, what's the larger theme? And I think it works for businesses, it works for personal brands. It's really a conversation of how do you step back and how do you kind of approach life from the top of the umbrella and think about, what are those general themes for your work and life? And I was challenged by that. I also bit of an Easter egg here that in coming up with these 10 stories, they're each a core value of mine. And that was something that I didn't realize until I started to see them all. And I was like, these are actually my core values. I never named them like that. Right. It wasn't like, here is my core value number one. I never named them like that. It's more of, here's the thing that happened, whether it was a positive experience or a challenging experience. There are a lot of stories of kind of rallying and coming back from a difficult, experience. But at the end of the day, they all are how I live my life, how we do our work. And so that's a little bit of an Easter egg that I kind of fell into, that I was like, oh, I never realized that I did that. But that's just kind of a fun thing I took note of.
Yeah, I love that. It's so neat to go back and reflect on what you've actually seen during the book. I know whenever I'm writing, there are times when I'll hit a point and I'll go, oh my God, I'm writing that because that matters. That matters to me. And I didn't even realize that matters to me. So I love that you did the same thing. That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't realize it. And some people will recognize, I've taken things that I've written about before somewhere else and I've super heavy edited and kind of gave them a new life, because I love some of these classic stories that are part of who I am in my career. And so in kind of reevaluating them, I'm like, that actually did have a more significant impact than I realized. And here's how people see it or experience it today. So it was a fun practice to reflect and then also move them forward with me.
Very cool. So I know there are several different themes in this book. What do you think is the big takeaway?
My big takeaway to everyone is to pay attention. I feel like it is the biggest lesson and also the simplest.
Yeah.
I think you shared this. this is not a call to action to like start a business, become an entrepreneur, like declutter your life, future-proof your career. This is not that. I think there are conversations about that in other books and other places. This is not that story. I think this is really maybe putting your phone down, or maybe having your phone in your hand and still being able to pay attention to how your life and your work is unfolding. And it's really a story about the power of self-reflection too. Like, I've always been a big self-reflector, probably too much sometimes. But really taking a look at these things that are happening to you, really micro moments, difficult conversations, or those like imposter moments. I talk a lot about those imposter moments in here, and also then realizing how you move forward from those. Like, what did I learn from that? Or how am I showing up as somebody new, something new the next day because I had this experience, I thought about it, and now I'm changing the way I'm behaving or showing up because of that.
That's beautiful. I think if we could pick a theme for the books that we put out this year, it would be like presence and awareness. There have been so many stories that are like, put the phones down, let's pause, and let's look at what we've done, what we're doing, what we want to do.
Yeah, I think we all just really crave that. And I mean, we're going into such a good season to practice that, whether, with the holidays and Advent and just a new year coming. It's interesting because I think culturally people think like, oh, this means I have to take a sabbatical from life, or, get off social. And that, I don't want you to do that. I just want you to pay attention to like, interactions you have, or conversations, or what worked or didn't work, and maybe move forward because you've learned something in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's like the perfect place to leave people with here. So where can everybody find your work? How can they connect with you?
Yes. So obviously you can buy the book today on Amazon. That's probably the first thing. If you go anywhere today, please purchase the book on Amazon as both Kindle and paperback. To connect with me, I'm on, probably my favorites are LinkedIn and Instagram. So please connect there. I'm also on Facebook, just not as frequently. And then to keep up with work, I keep a blog. I publish a blog twice a month on megseitz.com. And then to follow the work that our company does, we are Toth Shop, TOTH shop.com.
Awesome. Once this is all wrapped up, we can put those links in the comments.
Perfect.
Very cool.
Awesome. So, thank you for having me, Corey. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I loved having you on today. This was such a great conversation. It's not nearly often enough that I get to talk to other writers and authors, especially. So thank you. And I wanted to remind everybody to go pick up this gorgeous book. As Meg said, it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but we're looking for bestseller on Amazon today. So make sure you go pick up the ebook copy of this. It's only 99 cents today only. And also, you want to get this in your hand. I know everybody wants a paperback copy, so grab this while you can. Thank you, Meg, for being on. This was so wonderful. We're going to drop the link for the book and the links for Meg's work in the comments. And if you have questions for us, make sure you comment. We're happy to answer them. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey.